Hello, my name is Jim Anderson, and I'm a teaching artist with the Mayhow Arts Alliance. We're here in Twisp, Washington. It's very snowy outside, but we're thinking about spring and planting gardens, and that's one of my favorite things. So today I'm going to show you a little bit about seeds and how they grow. And we're going to be working with pumpkin seeds. So I brought some pumpkin seeds today just to show you what they look like if you don't know. Okay, so these are pumpkin seeds, and you can see they have a distinctive shape to them. Most of them I've seen look more or less like this. They've got this nice little rim around them. I took one and I peeled the shell off of it, and this is the inside, and I don't know if you've ever eaten these, but they're quite delicious. The reason I did it is because I wanted to show you, I don't know if you could kind of see there's some little lines here, but these are actually the first two leaves. These are the seed leaves of a pumpkin, and they're folded inside there and they come out. And if I can just separate it, well, there's not really much to see in here, but this little tiny little bitty thing here is actually what they call the embryo of the plant. It's a part that has the teeny little root in it and the teeny little stem and the teeny leaves, but it's these big leaves that are the first two leaves. The root is going to come out right at this point right here. And at this point, there's a little teensy hole that I never even knew was there that lets water in. So when it lets water in, it softens everything up and things start to swell. And that tells the seed that it's ready to start growing. Even if it's been sitting somewhere for, a couple years, it's still good. And then that little root will come right out of here. So now let's draw some. This is basically what we're going to draw today. And you're going to need some kind of a pencil, some kind of a big eraser, and hopefully some kind of a pen, because I want to go and ink these pencil lines after we do them in pen first. And then beyond that, if you want to use colored pencils, you can. This is something that took me just a few minutes with colored pencils, and I kind of think it really adds to it, but you notice I left a lot of white. I don't think it's really necessary to color in the whole page at all. I find it really nice to make texture, like these swirly kind of lines with the pencils, rather than just do randomly. But anyway, we'll get to that later. So, why don't you get your materials together and we'll start drawing. Okay, the first thing I want you to do is take your pencil and make a really light line just right across the middle of your paper, okay? It doesn't have to be dark, it doesn't have to be perfectly even. And then just for and then we're going to start with the very first step is just the seed itself, like that one I showed you. If you've watched me before, you know I turn my paper all the time. It just makes it way easier. And so I'm starting with the seed, and it's just a shape. I use really light pencil lines to start out, real sketchy lines. You don't really have to commit at this point. You could darken them in later, and then eventually you're probably going to ink it, and then you can erase them. So this is just the beginnings. So it's shaped like that, kind of like an almond, but it's got this really nice, I really kind of like this little rim that it's got around it. It's very distinctive of pumpkins and squashes. So that is the seed. Okay, so the inside of the seed, there's several things inside the seed, and I think maybe we'll draw it and then I'll talk about that. Okay, so we put this in the ground, maybe put a little more dirt on top of it. You could plant, the thing is, when the root comes popping out of here, gravity tells it to go straight down. So even if you planted this pointy side up, it would still go down, it would still work, because the plant understands gravity. Okay, so the next step, we have the seed, but this time it's on its side. We just flipped it onto its side, and that will help you draw it better and see what's going on better. So seeds need a couple of things before they start growing. The soil needs to be warm. It can't be super cold or they won't grow. And there needs to be moisture in it as well. And if the soil is warm enough, I think for pumpkins it's about 66 degrees. Kind of like what's warm for you is warm enough for a pumpkin. They don't like real cold soil. And that will get them to start growing, and the cells will start dividing, and all the things will get going into motion. So you can see I've got it on its side. It almost looks like a little mouth with lips, doesn't it? Looks like it's singing or something. And then this little tiny baby root is real tiny. It comes poking out. That's the first thing it does. And then it swells up. And it's really kind of fat looking up at the top. And it goes down, down, down. Gets thinner. That's called tapering. So it tapers down. It doesn't ever get to a really sharp point, but something like that. Now the other thing that you'll notice if you look at one of these close up is they've got these little bumps. And these little bumps are where the roots are going to grow. But they start out just these little bumps, and they only go about a third of the way down. They don't go all the way down like this, okay? The next stage is this little guy opening up even more. And now it looks like they open their mouth. Now it looks like they're singing. It's like, ah, what's happening to me? I think they know what's happening to them, but you know. Okay, so I'm drawing the upper part of the seed first. I'm drawing the little rim, kind of like a smiley face on its side. And then I draw this little kind of a frowny face thing on top of it. And then on the bottom, I do another little rim, but this one kind of bends down like this. See how it kind of looks like a big laughing face almost? That's what it looks like to me anyway. When I'm drawing, I tend to think of all these silly things. Kind of helps me remember what's going on, helps me do it. So this is science, but you know, you can still use your imagination if it helps you remember things. Okay, so see how it's really opened up right there, and it's because the root has grown more. I'm going to get an example over here. But also, there's this little, it's like there's a little tiny plant inside the seed. It's teensy, teensy, tiny. And it starts growing. And these are actually leaves that are still inside the seed. And this is the stem. And you see how the stem is kind of looping down. Because the stem comes from this little place that has the baby plant that started out with the baby plant where the root started. And so it's the same thing, that same root. Now, the roots are gonna change as you keep drawing this, but that's okay because that's what they do in nature. So it's not like you have to draw the roots the same both times at all. So here we've got these leaves. These are they're called the cotyledon leaves, but let's just call them the seed leaves. That's a lot easier. There's fancy words for all of this stuff, but to tell you the truth, I never even knew what some of those words were till 2 days ago. And I've grown a lot of seeds, so it's good to know those words, but it's not important at first. So where those little bumps were, now we've got little roots growing out, and they kind of curve around. And you know, it's one of those things where they don't have to be any certain way. You could just curve them how you want, but they're all kind of going down. And you know how much I like overlapping, or maybe you don't, but I really like overlapping, so I put one root that's going to overlap. It's going to go down and then just go like this, and then bump and jump over, bump into this root, and they just kind of come out like over there. And then on the other side, I'm going to have a root that comes across like this and stops, because it's going to go under a root. So it curves kind of like a smiley face. Actually, it's like a smiley face if I do it like that. And then this other root comes along and it kind of makes a nice little curve. And then this guy jumps over. And another root. We're almost done with these guys. then just a real little one here. And I noticed here I left it kind of square. It looks like some kind of little bug chomped it off, which does happen. Even those little pill bugs, the roly-polies, if they don't have enough organic matter to eat, they'll eat the roots of little plants like this. Oh, another important thing is this, you have a shadow right here because you're kind of seeing the inside of the seed right there, okay? And this is still attached. So this is the seed. This is called the seed coat. The outside of the seed is called the seed coat, and it protects what's inside. Okay, now the very last stage we're going to do, we make the seed coat almost exactly the same way because it's opened as wide as it can, wide as it needs to. It's not going to change any. So it's basically the same step over again. And then this root thing is basically the same. I'm going to actually draw the form of the root down, but it's going to go further down. And I find it easier to just draw that in first and then add the little roots. So it's going much deeper. And basically it has roots coming out in the same way as it did a few days earlier. They're just longer. So everything's just longer and it's just grown a little bit more. And like again, don't worry, don't get stressed out if these roots don't look like mine. It really doesn't matter. The whole idea of this is to draw a picture that tells a story, and it's telling a story of how seeds sprout. Now the fancy word for sprouting is germinate, but it's a word that I know, but it's not a word that you need to use. You could say sprout. Sprout's a good word. So this is what happens when a seed sprouts. Just do another, I'm going to do another one of those ones that go underneath because that really adds a lot of, it makes your picture look three-dimensional. It just adds a kind of a cool touch to it. Okay, so now before I ink it, I would go over these and I'd kind of darken them in the way I want them. And if I made some mistakes, if I made some part too fat or too skinny, then I would just try to correct it at this point. The other thing I'm going to correct is all these places where I have roots coming out and I just added them on. I erased that little part where they add on because there isn't a little line that goes there. Okay, so now we've got this part done. I'm going to kind of smooth that out a little bit. Okay, now the very last stage. So this little stem has gotten quite big now. It's popped way up out of the ground. And these leaves are very they're not round, but they're very smooth. They're not jiggity-jaggedy at all. And if you know what a pumpkin looks like, you know that pumpkin leaves have all kinds of jaggedy shapes on them. But these are called seed leaves. And the seed leaves are very simple and they don't look like the other leaves. And they're the first thing to grow and they're feeding the plant, but they drop off pretty quickly. However, there is this the little next leaves are coming up and it's kind of all furled up, but you could see that they're jaggedy. And so this will turn into the second set of leaves, and the second set of leaves, they're called the true leaves. So they look more like what the leaves are going to look like. Now these guys, these little tiny seed leaves, they've got these kind of veins in them. And the little veins are what kind of help all the nutrients, all the food, all the water, all the moisture go out around the leaf and go into the plant. And these little leaves now, they turn green because they're out in the light. And since they're plants, they do a thing called photosynthesis, which is where they take sunlight and they turn it into food, which is one of the most amazing things that happens on our planet, one of the most amazing things. Okay. So that is basically the pencil drawing. So if you want to go over and just kind of maybe tweak things a little bit the way you want them, then I will come back in a minute and we're going to start inking this puppy. I mean this sprout. Okay? Now you're ready to start inking. You've decided where you want the lines to be, and you just very kind of calmly and just very happily, because I know it can make me a bit nervous, but you just calmly and happily ink it. And if it doesn't come out quite how you want it, don't worry about it. You can't erase it. So there's some things about inking that are kind of a drag, but a lot of good things. Okay, and then this little guy. One thing I will advise you is never try to use whiteout to fix your ink. I've had students so many times, Mr. Anderson, do you have any whiteout? I'm like, oh gosh, are you kidding me? Because it really doesn't work very good. So you just basically got to give yourself a break. Okay, so there's that little seed, and then I'm just making these little bumps just come out. And so as soon as I finish this, see how I kind of have it overlapping there? Then I'm going to have you take a little bit of time and go ahead and ink the rest of this, and then I'm going to show you some stuff about coloring. Okay? What I'm doing now is I'm going to finish it with the color. For the ground, I love to put these little circles because these are, to me, grains of soil, and it shows that you've got good soil. And I love the way they always poke up out of the ground like this with this little curve. Now to color it, it is just super, super easy. I mean, you've got your green, and so things like this, you can just color them fairly rapidly. But then for sure, if I do the green, I'll definitely take some yellow and I'll just, make it look a lot more brighter with yellow. Now that's a little bit too bright, so I'll go over it with green again. But for the soil itself, what I would like to do is I want to make it kind of light. See how I did on this one here? I think it looks a lot better when the whole thing's not colored. And you really want these roots to really stick out and shine. The seeds themselves are like almost white. They're kind of tan colored. These things are pure white. So I just like to kind of get kind of a rhythm going and have the lines kind of, it's just like using those lost and found, well, not lost and found lines, but those lines that go underneath. It doesn't have to be perfect, but I find it's just fun for me to make kind of a nice rhythm with the coloring. And you could use a little bit of black in the soil, but I wouldn't say all black because that just gets boring. But say you wanted to put some black right against some of these little roots to make them really pop out more, you could. You could even use a little bit of blue in it. Just don't go overboard. People go, why is this soil blue? But if you just use a little bit, it just makes it interesting. So basically, yeah, have fun coloring it. You could color lightly. You don't have to color the whole page. If you want to, you could draw some little worms and stuff in there. And this is a sprouting pumpkin seed.